Imagine walking into a massive tech expo in Shanghai. The lights are blazing, the crowd is electric, and then you see it. A humanoid robot walks onto the stage. It waves at the crowd, it makes coffee, it does a perfect backflip. The audience goes wild. Smartphones go up everywhere. Someone beside you whispers, "Is this even real?" People are cheering. It genuinely looks like the future arrived early. And honestly, watching it, it really does look incredible. Hundreds of engineers, billions of dollars, all converging on this one stage moment. But here's the thing, in the back of my mind, one question keeps coming back. A question nobody in that crowd is asking. Who is actually hiring this robot? Not watching it, not filming it, but writing a check, putting it on payroll, and keeping it working. Because here's a fact that cuts through all the hype. A robot isn't a success when people applaud. It's a success when someone employs it. Today's story is about that gap, the space between the applause and the actual customer. Robots, planes, and the history of industrial ambition. Let's start with the scale of what China is actually doing, because the numbers here, they are genuinely hard to wrap your head around. In 2024, China had over 2 million industrial robots working in factories. About 4.5 times more robots than Japan, the next closest country. China installed 295,000 industrial robots in a single year. That's 54% of all robot installations globally. In 1 year, by 2025, China had over 140 humanoid robot manufacturers, over 330 different humanoid models on the market, 140 companies in one country? Hey, quick question. If you had to guess how many humanoid robot companies exist in the United States right now, what would your number be? Chinese humanoid robots accounted for roughly 85% of the entire global humanoid market in 2025. To put that in perspective, that's near total dominance. Top startups like Agibot and Unitree each shipped over 5,000 humanoid units last year. American rivals like Figure AI and Tesla shipped just a few hundred. Unitree alone reported $250 million in revenue last year, with $41 million in profit. These are not just demo companies anymore. China's 2026-2030 five-year plan placed robotics at the very heart of national strategy, not as a side project, but as a primary economic driver. So let's be clear about the starting point. China's problem is not that it cannot build humanoid robots. China absolutely can. The question is something else entirely. Before we go further, we need to step back and understand something fundamental. What actually makes a robot industry a real, lasting industry? Because liking a robot and paying for a robot are two completely different things. The gap between those two is enormous and often invisible. Historically, robots don't become industries because they look cool. They become industries when they solve three specific, boring economic problems. Problem 1. Human labor becomes too expensive. Problem 2. There aren't enough human workers at all. Problem 3. The job is too dangerous or too repetitive. Take Japan. In the 1970s, Japan's automotive industry was growing fast, faster than it could find skilled welders and assemblers to fill the factories. So Japan turned to robots. Not because robots were exciting, because there were literally not enough people. Japan's working-age population has been shrinking since 1995. As of this year, 1 in 3 Japanese companies is already using or seriously considering AI-powered robots, driven almost entirely by labor shortages. Now look at the United States. High wages, labor shortages, and reshoring manufacturing are all pushing American factories hard toward automation right now. MIT research shows that one additional industrial robot per 1,000 workers reduces average wages by nearly 0.5%. Real economic pressure creates real adoption. Here's the question I want you to sit with. If robots need economic pain to find real buyers, what exactly is China's pain point right now? China still has hundreds of millions of manufacturing workers. Labor costs are rising, yes, but they remain far below US or European wage levels. Research on Chinese firms found that rising wages only started meaningfully driving robot adoption after 2008. The economic pressure is building, but it's building slowly. So here's where China gets genuinely interesting, because two very different stories are happening simultaneously in the same country at the same time. Story 1. China's industrial robots. In electronics, metals, food processing, and battery manufacturing, the economic logic is crystal clear. Robots are needed. Robots are bought. Domestic suppliers now control 57% of China's industrial robot market. In metal and machinery, their share is 90%. The economics work. Full stop. Story 2. Humanoid robots. And this is where the paradox shows up, because humanoids face a completely different set of questions than industrial arms. A humanoid robot looks like a person. That's the appeal. But looking like a person doesn't automatically mean doing a person's job better than a person does. Think about what a business manager actually asks before purchasing a robot. How much does it cost per day compared to simply paying a human worker? If it breaks down, and it will, who is responsible for repairs? How long until I recover my investment? How many years to break even? And the hardest question of all, can this robot actually work 8 hours straight in a messy, unpredictable real-world environment? Not just at an expo? The honest answer right now? Most humanoid robots in China are still in demo and pilot mode. They're impressive. But impressive isn't the same as deployed. In 2025, China's own National Development and Reform Commission publicly warned about a bubble risk, citing too many companies chasing too few real customers. Over 140 companies, over 330 models, and the government telling them, stop making the same robot twice. Does that sound like a healthy market to you? Here's the paradox in one sentence. The market doesn't ask whether a robot can dance. The market asks whether a robot can pay for itself. And here's where I want to take you on a detour. Because this situation, technology that impresses before it serves, has happened before. In aviation, let me tell you about a machine that was technically brilliant, nationally beloved, and commercially catastrophic. This is the story of the Concorde. It was November 1962. Britain and France sat down together and signed a treaty. The mission was audacious. Build the world's first supersonic passenger jet. Not just any jet. A plane that could fly at Mach 2, twice the speed of sound. London to New York in 3.5 hours. Engineers worked for over a decade. The technology was extraordinary. Delta wings, a drooping nose, heat-resistant alloys. The Cold War was on. National pride was everything. The Concorde made its first commercial flight on January 21st, 1976. Simultaneously and at London to Bahrain, Paris to Rio de Janeiro. The world watched in awe. Want to know how fast we're talking? While the regular 747 took 7 hours to cross the Atlantic, Concorde did it in 3.5. It was the most glamorous aircraft in history. Celebrities, diplomats, business executives. Concorde wasn't just a plane. It was a status symbol with wings. But here's the problem. Concorde was solving one thing: speed. The airlines it needed to sell to had a completely different priority: cost. Concorde burned enormous amounts of fuel. Operating costs were astronomical. It carried only around 100 passengers per flight, against a normal jet's 300. So tickets were outrageously expensive. Think $5,000 one way in 1970s money. That's roughly $40,000 in today's terms. For one flight. Of 18 airlines that originally ordered the Concorde, 18, only 2 actually bought it. British Airways and Air France. Both government-owned. Essentially forced to, both airlines needed government subsidies just to keep flying it. Development costs were so enormous they could never, ever be recovered through ticket sales alone. Then came the 1970s oil crisis. A plane already burning too much fuel became financially devastating. The economics, bad from the start, got catastrophic overnight. In 2000, a Concorde crashed in Paris, killing 113 people. 3 years later, both airlines retired the fleet. The era of supersonic commercial travel was over. Concorde proved that governments and companies can cooperate to build something technically extraordinary, but it never proved the market actually needed what it built. Now, at almost exactly the same time, in the same part of the world, a completely different aviation project was quietly getting started. In 1967, France, Germany, and Britain signed a memorandum of understanding. Goal: create a European aircraft company that could compete with American aviation giants. They called it Airbus. And the very first thing Airbus did which Concorde never really did, was go ask airlines what they actually needed. Not, how fast can we go? Not, how impressive can we make this? But, what does your operating budget look like? What problems keep you up at night? The A300, launched in 1972, was the world's first twin-engine wide-body jet. Fewer engines, more passengers, much lower operating costs per seat. Airlines didn't love it because it was glamorous. They bought it because it made financial sense. It reduced cost, which is the actual language of business. Then came the A320 in 1984. Short to medium range, fly-by-wire technology, efficient, reliable, and affordable to operate every single day of the year. In 1992, Airbus landed a landmark order from United Airlines, Boeing's home turf. It was a shock to the entire industry. The tables were turning. By 2016, for the first time in history, Airbus sold more aircraft than Boeing. In October 2025, the A320 family became the most delivered jetliner ever built. From a government-backed consortium, nobody expected to survive, to beating Boeing in cumulative deliveries. That is what happens when industrial policy meets actual market reality. So let's put these two stories side by side. Concorde, Airbus. Both received enormous government funding. Both were industrial policy. Different outcomes entirely. The difference wasn't the technology. It wasn't even the money. The difference was the question each project was fundamentally trying to answer. Concorde asked, what is technically possible? Airbus asked, what does the market actually need? One question leads to an achievement. The other leads to a business. Look at the pattern. Japan's robots solved a real labor shortage. China's EVs solved a real price problem. U.S. warehouse automation solved a real labor cost problem. In every successful case, the policy worked because the market's pain was already real, already being felt, before the government accelerated the solution. Now look at the failures. Concorde tried to sell glamour when airlines wanted efficiency. Hydrogen car programs built infrastructure before any consumer wanted to buy. The lesson isn't that government investment is bad. The lesson is that it works when it accelerates a solution to a pain the market already feels. Good industrial policy doesn't ignore the market. It listens to the market's pain. And then it builds around that pain with serious money and scale. So, let's bring this back to where we started. The Expo floor in Shanghai, the backflip, the coffee, the crowd with the phones. China's humanoid robot industry. Is it going to be Concorde or Airbus? That's the real question on the table. What do you think so far? Here's what China genuinely has going for it. Manufacturing supply chains unmatched anywhere on Earth. The ability to drop prices fast, government scale commitment. Chinese humanoid robots are already 20% cheaper than competitors on average. Morgan Stanley estimates that by 2050, average prices could fall to around $21,000. Morgan Stanley expects China's humanoid shipments to more than double in 2026. Analysts forecast advanced robot shipments could surpass 1 million units by the early 2030s. But here's what China still needs more than anything else. Not better technology, not cheaper parts. It needs a clear answer to one simple question. Who is actually hiring this robot? Not government-mandated deployments, not Expo demos, but a factory manager choosing the robot over the monthly labor bill. The more realistic near-term path is industrial and logistics settings, warehouses, dangerous jobs, repetitive assembly, places where labor is genuinely scarce or hazardous. China has a real demographic clock ticking. Its population is aging. Wages are rising. If humanoid robots can meet those pressures, the market may actually open up. Let me leave you with one final comparison. Concorde made history but never made money. Airbus made history and made money. The difference was always the customer. China doesn't need humanoid robots that impress visitors at expos. It needs robots that a factory manager, hospital, or warehouse owner is willing to put on payroll. So I'll leave you with the same question the whole story has really been about. Can a state build the future before the market asks for it? Or does every great technology, no matter how impressive, how fast, how beautiful, still need one single unglamorous thing? A paying customer. That's a wrap for today. A robot becomes a revolution not when it dances on stage, But when someone puts it on the payroll,